Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the bed lift system in this van and how I built it and how you can do it too. If you're like me and you know that you're probably too lazy to make and take apart your bed every single morning, like many van conversions have when they have rear bench setups like this, you might also have considered an elevator bed or an electronic bed lift system, depending on how you've heard the term. And if you've done any research, you might have noticed that a company called Happy Jack makes these systems pre-made, but they're very expensive and they don't necessarily work the way you want in your van. That's why I decided to build my own system so that I could integrate it in a more sleek design. That way it's not immediately obvious how it's set up, how it's built, and it fits more cohesively with the overall look of the van. The main component of this bed lift system are these linear track actuators built by a company called Progressive Automations out of here in Auburn, Washington. What's great about these, other than just how they look, which I think is an important part as well, are how quiet they are and the fact that independently they're each able to support 150 pounds of force. So the bed combined can support 600 pounds, including the platform, but that's plenty for just about every application. Also, they're very easy to use, and they've been very reliable for me so far. They move at close enough to the same speed each that there aren't many problems that can't just be solved by the limit switches, which I'll be getting into in a second. It was very important to me that the system look very good and that the underside of the bed continues the overall look of the ceiling. That way, it just fits with the design that I had in mind. So if you're looking to build something similar that also has a sleek design, I would definitely recommend following the idea that I had and using these Progressive Automations linear track actuators in your build. It is more expensive than some DIY builds that would use something like a garage door pull or a winch or even a manual system, maybe with a counterweight, but it is still significantly cheaper than the professional systems that are built by companies like Happy Jack that at the end of the day are essentially the same thing. And in my opinion, they're not even as good because they're louder. Obviously, they're more expensive, and I don't think they're as well concealed. To use the bed lift in this van, it's as easy as just taking the button and pressing down. As you can see, it also illuminates, which is part of the idea so that even though it doesn't necessarily matter because of the strength of the system, at night, if I accidentally left it on down or up, then I'm able to see it because it emits some light. The best part about this is that because of the limit switches, once it actually reaches its ultimate height or depth, it just stops automatically where it's supposed to go. So it's very easy to use. Just like that. And when you're done, you can just set it in the middle. It's just a rocker switch, but it's what's called a continuous rocker switch. So it has continuous options for each. You don't have to hold it down because it does take some time, and it would be a little boring to just sit there holding the button. To use this as normal, it's as easy as clearing some of the space so that the bed is able to go down to its ultimate depth, which is right on top of all of these trusses that I have on all four corners. So as long as the pillows are in a way where they can get compressed down to the right height, then that's fine. And then this table, which is on a Lagoon table mount like you see in most vans, is as easy as allowing it to go down far enough. Once it's below that level, then I know that all I have to do is press the button for the bed to come down. And the bed will automatically go down to where it's supposed to. You might have noticed when the bed goes down or up, not all four corners necessarily reach that limit at the exact same time. That's because the system does not use any kind of programming. Instead, all four actuators are just wired with their own inline limit switches. That way, when they reach their limit switch, the power stops being supplied to the individual actuator. Therefore, it automatically adjusts on the way up and on the way down every single time. So even though one or two or three or all of the actuators might be out of step with each other to the degree of a few percent, it doesn't really matter because they still arrive where they need to, and the bed frame is flexible enough to accommodate that, which you definitely need to have planned out if you're going to build a system that has 4 actuators like this. You can't assume they're all going to travel at the same speed, specifically because the speed that they're able to travel is not only dependent on the hardware itself, also dependent on the amount of weight that they individually are supporting. So if you're parked on some kind of slant, they're not all going to be supporting the same amount of weight, so they're not all going to move necessarily at the same speed. The limit switches that control the height and depth of the bed are built into these trim panels here. That way it can conceal it a little better. I'll take apart one of these so that you can see the exact way that that's set up and how it's wired in and get a better idea of how the bed operates. Screws down here. I guess I can reach it. And then the single screw up there. Now this trim panel is also what holds in the curtain rod up top, but if I slide it just a little bit, you'll be able to get an idea of what's happening back here. Alright, so behind each of those panels is one of these limit switches right here, which specifically allows for the actuator to be reversed. That is one thing you definitely need to make sure when you're choosing a limit switch. I will put all of the tools and products that I ordered in the description. That way you can also get them yourself. I'm not sponsored by any of these companies. This is just what I found that is the best. So I definitely have an unbiased recommendation, at least as unbiased as I can be. I only really use these systems. Unbiased recommendation. But this specific limit switch here allows power to be cut, but when the polarity is reversed to the actuator, it can still power itself on and go the other way. Not all limit switches do that. Some limit switches, once they cut power, you have no way of correcting that. And so you need to make sure you pick the right ones. Like I said, I'll have these in the description. When the bed finally comes down to its lowest point, this is activated on all 4 corners, stopping the system and leaving the bed exactly where it's supposed to be. When down to its maximum extent, that's just above these little trusses here, which serve as fail-safes in any event of the bed collapsing. It'll still be supported by something before I'm able to fix it, and of course get off the bed. That way it doesn't crush the entire system, which would be pretty disastrous. Attach this, it's as simple as popping the trim panel back in place. I'm gonna lift it up a little bit, lining it up with the holes that it was drilled in a second ago. And screwed it back in. As for the top on all 4 sides, I don't need my own aftermarket limit switch because the built-in limit switches in these track actuators already is at the height that I wanted it to be. So when you're building the system, be sure to know what the highest point of your bed is and is going to be given the mattress depth and the blankets and things like that. You want enough clearance for, despite the compression, for your actuators to still be able to go all the way to the end. It makes a lot more sense and it's a lot easier and more reliable to use the built-in limit switches at the end of the actuators to be one of your 2 positions. If you can do top and bottom, you don't even need to worry about that. It's much easier. You're not going to have to wire in your own aftermarket switches. But that's probably not realistic given the fact that when you're building out something like a van or an RV, everything is ridiculously custom. For me, I got lucky with the 2 back ones. The 2 over there, for the look and the aesthetic, I wanted them to go all the way down, so I installed my own switches. And then the top, I give myself about, from the base of this to the top of the edge, about 11 inches of space, which is just enough for the mattress plus the depth of the bed frame itself to be able to fully go up to the top and have no real issues with that and not spike the draw or anything like that by having to actually use the compressive abilities of the actuators. Instead, it can just go to its natural last position. Inside my electronics compartment, you can get an idea of how these are wired in. All of these are wired into the same fuse, and unlike some of your appliances, even though everything should always be fused, a fuse for a system like this is very, very important. Specifically because it has in theory, an infinite draw because the resistance is determined by the amount of power it needs to complete its cycle. So if you're going to be using all of the compressive force by pushing something that's impossible, for example, if you built the bed too high and the bed is trying to squeeze against the ceiling and it's going to break the ceiling, of course the ceiling is going to win that fight. So instead what you're going to be left with is, unless you have, of course, a fuse protected system, the wires or some small electronic component inside the actuators themselves is going to burn up, and then you're going to have to buy a whole new system because it's going to demand so much power to be able to do that, far more than it's actually able to accept. I don't know for sure if the actuators themselves have fuses to protect. I assume they do, but of course that's not something you're going to have easy access to. If I ever needed to replace this, it would not be easy and it would require a lot of disassembly. So instead, protect yourself with the 15 amp fuse that I put in there, which is perfect for all four systems combined. And if I ever have to overdraw it by, say, leaving a few pillows or something on top or not lowering the table, it'll pop that fuse long before it's able to demand, you know, the 30, 40, 50 amps that would be able to fry the electronics inside the actuators individually. Down here underneath the conversion, you can see where these wires come in, two of which are the positive and negative master loop that provides power to all four actuators. And then right here you can see tap splice that allows me to pull power out of all four of those, which is present on all four corners, being able to individually sap power. And this is what you want to wire, well, of course on the negative side. The negative tap out of the main line is what you want to wire your limit switches into. Therefore, it cuts power to the individual loop, not to the full loop. Or else, once one actuator reaches its ultimate position, it would cut power to all four, which of course would not re-level the bed every time, which is kind of the point. Then connected to the actuators, you can see these L brackets that are screwed using either the provided bolts or bolts of the same size. As long as they're under 1.5 inches, they're going to be able to fully insert into the housing for the actual moving part of the actuator. This L bracket is then bolted straight through to this aluminum 1x1 aluminum square tubing, which runs the entire length here, on top of which are 8 of these square tubes that run the full length this way, creating a frame underneath, which I then was able to put some plywood bolted through to then make the bottom of the faux roof. Now you might be thinking that much square tubing would not be able to support, you know, a bed that's going to hold hundreds of pounds, which is why I actually have 2x4s running the length of each side and then 2x4s L bracketed along the entire bottom of the mattress, which is way more weight than even the actuators would be able to support. On top of which I just have the normal bed cladding support and then the 7.5 inch memory foam mattress laying on top of that. It's perfect. It flexes the exact amount that it should, because it is, you know, you're going to have to create a balance between how much weight you want to put into the system and how much flex you want to allow. And with two people even sitting in the middle of the bed, it flexes, but it flexes an amount that is way below the tensile strength theoretical limit of the bed structure, so there's no problems with that. Any design plus the weight of the bed, plus the weight of the people, is your theoretical limit. And that's not just the theoretical limit for being able to use the actuators and move up and down. I never move the bed up and down with somebody on it, except for when I took the thumbnail, because it does actually work. As long as you are significantly below that threshold, you can probably reliably do that. Of course, it's not very safe, because 600 pounds is quite a bit, and would probably be able to squish you against the ceiling pretty hard, at least up until the point of blowing that fuse. But generally speaking, I like to put less strain, and that 600-pound figure is the amount of weight that these can support when voltage is supplied, but not necessarily being run through. The resistance is what's able to support the 600 pounds. Putting extra power into that is just going to put more strain into the servo motors at the bottom that are actually driving the track. You can see the way the action works inside. It's a big corkscrew. a greased corkscrew that slowly brings up the moving part that actually you're able to actually bolt into for the actuator's purpose. And it's a very reliable system using a sort of worm gear drive like that. You just really don't want that to break or that to end up skipping gears, because the servo at the bottom, if it's overpowered, will skip gears. And there definitely are some plastic gears inside this. I don't know if that's changed in future iterations of these actuators, but those definitely, at least as far as I would assume, can break if used improperly. That also ties into another purpose of these trusses. If one of those limit switches were to fail, bend too much, or just fall out, or I don't know, if it didn't work for some reason, and the bed crashed into this, it would spike the amperage and pop that fuse long before it was able to do any serious damage. It's definitely an important thing to fuse this system in particular. All of these actuators are attached at the top and bottom, where the top mounting point is screwed directly into the main bed system, which is made of, wooden 2x4s, 1x2s, things like that. That's screwed up on top, and then at the bottom, there's an L bracket that runs into the U-nut on here, which is bolted in through, and then that's also screwed directly into the same 2x4. They do have some other mounting solutions that Progressive Automation sells. I did forget to look for that in the mailbox, so I ended up building my own for these two on these two sides. But the two back there use the OEM mounting brackets, and they both work perfectly fine. Definitely a lot of customizability with the system, and I guess that is part of the point. So that's why I would recommend it for sure. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something. In my opinion, this is the coolest part of the build, and since it took me quite a while to arrive at this final destination with this exact setup, and there was a lot of troubleshooting, I had to build a lot of different things and take a lot of things apart. I definitely feel like ultimately the design that I've come up with now is definitely the best way to make this work. Of course, if you can afford to buy one of those Happy Jack systems or another professional bed lift, of course you can just go with that. But if you do want to build your own and you want it to look, in my opinion, as clean as this and as well hidden, and then also be as quiet and as user-friendly as this, definitely I would recommend following along with what I did and inspiring yourself, because I think that if you're going to live in a van, having a bed lift system makes a huge difference for just quality of life and convenience. Having to assemble a bed every single time, or having a fixed bed that takes up a lot of space, is another option. It's definitely a way that works, and it's something that you see very often in van conversions. But I think there's alternatives, and there's other ways, and there's better ideas. And in my opinion, I don't know that I could live in a van that didn't have a system that works as well as this, because it makes life a lot easier. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Like I said, all of the products and tools that I use to make this possible are available in the description. I'll have links to where you can order all of those things. I'm not sponsored by any of these companies, so you can take my word for it. They're definitely some of the top of the line products that will make your build as similar as you can to mine, so that you don't have to go through as many of the problems that I did. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.